Hello students, moving on with Niccolo Machiavelli's The Prince. Today we'll be taking up chapter 4 to 7. So in chapter 4 he discusses why the kingdom of Darius conquered by Alexander did not rebel against the successor of Alexander at his death. So I'll be discussing both this chapter in comparison and contrast to each other. So in chapter 5 he talks about things concerning the way to govern cities or principalities which lived under their own laws before they were annexed. So here when we see the chapters, these two chapters 4 and 5, he discusses that all the principalities are governed either by a single ruler assisted by his appointed minister or by a ruler and the hereditary nobles who hold power in their own right and have the loyalty of their subjects. Now he talks about the Turkish Sultan. Turkish Sultan divides his kingdom into districts that are managed by his administrators, but the king of France has to contend with many lords who have long-standing privileges because the Sultan's administrators are dependent on him for their power. They are not likely to help a foreign invader. But if an invader had a strong enough army to win, it would be easy to keep their territory because the people are not personally loyal to the administrators. So in a kingdom like France, the nobles are always ambitious and ready to turn against the king. But if they assist you in conquering the country, they will also be ready to turn on you. Even if you kill all the royal family, the nobles remain and you can neither satisfy them nor get rid of them. So whether one can control a territory depends less on personal ability than on the character of the territory. So he says that if the conquered territory was formerly a republic in which the citizens were used to living under their own laws, you must destroy it. Go live in it or let the citizens live under their own laws with a government that is friendly to you. If you do not destroy the city, it will destroy you. So fiercely will the citizens remember and long for their freedom. Now, when we analyze these two chapters, we find that Machiavelli contrasts two types of government, a strongly centralized model which he identifies with the East and the looser confederate model that dominated in the Western Europe. Machiavelli had ample opportunities to see the kinds of internal problems that afflicted decentralized collection of states. The example he cites is of France, which was actually remarkably stable and unified in comparison with his own region of Italy, where competing states invited foreign powers to invade, then turned on them only to turn each other as soon as the threat passed. Italy had indeed proved almost possible to conquer for exactly the reason Machiavelli cites, but it had also proved impossible to unify. So Machiavelli's comment about governing a conquered republic sound especially merciless. He says, destroy it, he cautions, or it will certainly destroy you. However, if you read Machiavelli's advice as directed towards the new Medici rulers of Florence, it takes on a different tone. If you want to avoid being destroyed by it, you must come and live in it and rule it directly. Machiavelli says this, or he advises the Medici government indirectly. Now, this is exactly what the Medici had failed to do in the period since their return to power. Spending almost all their time away from Florence, Machiavelli's vivid portrayal of the Republic's love of liberty can be read as a kind of warning to Medici about how ready their new position will be to return to its republican way if they do not do more to govern it. Now, in chapter 4, Machiavelli begins elaborating on the theme of ability versus circumstances in determining a leader's success or failure. He implies that the leader's talents are less important than the situation he finds himself in. He further adds, Machiavelli discusses this theme in detail throughout the book, culminating in his statements about the fortune and free will in chapter 25 as well. Now, the contrast between luck, specifically in the favor of others, and ability is further explained in chapter 6 and 7. So when we move on to chapter 6, we find that here he is discussing about things concerning new principalities which are acquired by one's own arms and ability. And here in this chapter, Machiavelli talks about the difficulty the new principalities or the new prince will depend on in his ability or stability. Now, private citizens become prince either through luck or through ability, but it is best not to trust luck. So, those who become prince through their own strength have difficulty gaining power, but keep it easily. Establishing new states is always troublesome, according to Machiavelli, because everyone who was happy under the old order will oppose change or the new changes, and most people will not support new things until they have seen them work. The question is whether innovators must rely on others in order to succeed, or whether they can rely on their own forces to succeed or to make themselves stable. Armed prophets succeed, but unarmed prophets must fail. The people are fickle, according to Machiavelli, and when they no longer believe in you, you must force them to believe in you. Now, when we analyze this chapter, we find that chapter 6 elaborates on the theme which is begun in chapter 5, which is about the personal ability of the prince. Now, the Italian word Machiavelli uses here is virtù, which does not have an exact English equivalent, because he uses this word to mean many things, but usually not virtue, which is different from virtue. He has spoken about virtù, which is not English word virtue, which in English implies goodness. If we talk about virtue, it implies goodness and moral behavior, whereas virtù, which Machiavelli has used in this chapter, is closer in meaning to the Latin word for masculine strength, virtus, from which English gets the word virility. Exactly what Machiavelli means by virtù is a subject of debate among scholars as well, because virtù can be ability, skill, energy, forcefulness, strength, ingenuity, courage, or determination. Virtù is the quality that distinguishes successful prince, or more accurately, successful innovators and conquerors. Now, the examples Machiavelli provides are all legendary founder of great civilization. When they found opportunities, they had the virtù to make the most of them. Now, Machiavelli makes a point of observing, however, that virtù without opportunity to use it is wasted, and without virtù, opportunity is wasted. So, the other theme of this chapter concerns the use of force. Machiavelli assumes that force or violence is an integral part of the state, and a ruler cannot do without it as a tool of the government. He observes that after your followers lose faith in your innovative schemes, you must force them to have faith, or at least to act as if they do by obeying you. His comment about unarmed prophet is based on the meteoric rise and fall of Savonarola, whose career Machiavelli had observed and whose failure had led to the reestablishment of Florentine Republic, in which Machiavelli served. Now, moving further, we find that he says in chapter 7 that or he discusses things concerning new principalities which are acquired either by the arms of others or by good fortune. Now, here he says, or he speaks about citizens who become princes through luck or the favor of others. Find it easy to acquire their states, but difficult to keep them. They are not used to being in command, and they have no armies of their own. Now, taking the example of Francisco Sforza, he became a prince by his own strength and kept his state. Caesar Borgia became a prince by his father's influence. So, here in this chapter, he has taken example of Francisco Sforza and Caesar Borgia. Now, Machiavelli makes a comparison between these two rulers. Now, here he says that Caesar Borgia became a prince by his father's influence, and despite his best effort, could not maintain his state after his father's influence failed. This was not his fault, but was caused by extraordinary bad luck. Now, he says that Alexander VI wanted to make his son great, but had no troops he could rely on. So Alexander allowed the France into Italy in exchange for the use of their troops to conquer the Romagna region. Here, Borgia succeeded and made more conquests, but worried about the French king and the loyalty of his Roman troops, led by the Orsini family. So he lured the Orsini leaders with gifts and promises of friendship, then killed them all. So he won the loyalty of the people in Romagna. He had at first found the Romagna to be lawless, so he put Ramiro di Orco in charge of restoring order, which he did well. However, Ramiro di Orco was so cruel that everyone hated him. So to deflect bad feeling from himself, Borgia publicly executed him, so that people could start believing that Ramiro di Orco was executed by Borgia because he was not a good ruler or not a good administrator. So obviously he was thinking, or Borgia was thinking, good of the people of Romagna. Now at this point, Borgia had laid good foundation for his power. But abruptly Alexander died and Borgia himself was extremely ill. So Borgia then made a mistake by not preventing the election of Pope hostile to him. In short, we can say Borgia was a model prince and did all things well except for his poor judgment about Julius II, which caused his downfall. Now, when we analyze this chapter, we find that although Machiavelli offers an example of prince who rose to power through his own ability in Francesco Sforza, he devotes most of this long chapter to analysis of the career of Caesar Borgia, whose rise depended on the favor of others, namely his powerful father, Pope Alexander VI, who was born as Rodrigo Borgia. So Machiavelli's admiration for Borgia shines throughout the description which he has done in this chapter. He sees in Borgia a model for all princely conquerors. Machiavelli had an opportunity to personally observe this dynamic duke when he was sent by the Florentine council to negotiate with Borgia about relation with Florence. Now Machiavelli was on this mission when Borgia lured his enemies to the city of Senigallia and had them strangled, and Machiavelli spoke with Borgia about the incident. Borgia was by all account ruthless, ambitious and boundlessly energetic, possessing a forceful personality that impressed those around him. So it is an accident that these are the same qualities possessed by Machiavelli's ideal prince, whom he has described in his book, The Prince. Now, Borgia radiates virtue, but in the end, it is not enough to save him because he remains dependent on the power and influence of his father. And his father's sudden death is pure bad luck, and his own unexpected illness put him on the path to ruin. So, the danger of dependency on others will become a key point in Machiavelli's argument, one he emphasizes later in his discussion of the armies. Now, Machiavelli's endorsement of Borgia's tactics including deceit, brutality and betrayal of his own agent is very enthusiastic, and you will find this very luring to read in this chapter. One may be more inclined to judge Borgia as a heartless master manipulator, expertly playing factions against one another, using those around him as needed and disposing of them as they become inconvenient. That means use till they are useful, otherwise kill them or throw them out. But for a brief period, he was stunningly successful, on the verge of consolidating his hold over Italy. And success in controlling the state is all that masters in Machiavelli's analysis. So he will be more explicit in chapter 18 on how necessary it is for a prince to be deceitful when circumstances call for it. That means this should be one of the trait of the prince, to be deceitful. And in chapter 17, however, he discusses how cruelty is often better than mercy to preserve the peace and order of the state. So this is all for the chapters. We'll be having further discussion in our next class. Thank you all.